Bridgen, and we're now joined by Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Michael, thank you for joining us. What's your take on Andrew Bridgen's speech? I mean, Anne here, one of our viewers, says, I don't like what Andrew Bridgen said about COVID and the vaccine, but he didn't compare it to the Holocaust. He said since the Holocaust, so he should not have had the whip removed. What do you say to Anne?
Well, I would say, Andrew Bridgen was a little bit unwise even mentioning the Holocaust. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, if I may, but I'd sort of say I heard Starmer's speech as well. And it was the same old thing where he just says, agree with what Ireland is going to suggest, agree with what Brussels is going to suggest, otherwise we're argumentative. I mean, the guy doesn't know anything about negotiation. But to get back to your point, look, I'll be honest with you. I was brought up in a Jewish family. I'm not practicing Jewish or anything, but it was distasteful, the comment about the Holocaust. But frankly, I was more annoyed by his comments about the vaccine, because it has saved millions of lives across the world. It's saved hundreds of thousands of lives here in the UK. Yes, there can be the occasional rare complication, but to suggest that we shouldn't take the vaccine, and later on he was saying that we shouldn't even engage in taking future mRNA vaccines, where there is incredible research going on at the moment to combat cancers with mRNA vaccines. And he just talks nonsense, because he was saying that, it's like genetic engineering on the human body. Well, that's about sensible.
But Michael, you disagree with...
That's about sensible as saying that, if you have a genetically engineered tomato, then it alters your body. It doesn't. Sorry, Philip. Carry on.
No, I was just going to say, look, you disagree with Andrew Bridgen and his concerns about the vaccine, but, some people have suffered damage from the COVID vaccine, that the government are paying out damages to people who have suffered harm from the vaccine. Lots of people are concerned that actually children shouldn't be taking the vaccine because the threat of COVID to them is so minuscule, it's not worth it. Surely members of Parliament should be able to speak out on their concerns, whether you agree with them or not, whether even necessarily they turn out to be true or not. Surely the duty of a member of Parliament is to raise concerns that people across the country have. Surely you shouldn't be always at risk of losing the whip just because you say something that you don't agree with, the whips don't agree with, that may or may not be proved to be correct, or else it's going to have a chilling effect on anyone ever criticising the government about anything, isn't it?
Well, there's two separate issues you've raised. One is what he said, and one is how the whips behave. And let me briefly talk to you about both. I mean, look, the problem with what Andrew Bridgen says is he is actually saying we shouldn't take the vaccine. And yes, as I said earlier, there have been some complications, but they're minuscule compared to the hundreds of thousands of lives which have been saved in the UK thanks to the vaccine. Look, there's always a risk. If you take an aspirin, there's a risk you may get a bleed and you might then die from the bleed. It's a minuscule risk, but you don't say don't take aspirin. You don't say don't take paracetamol. So what he's saying is nonsense. Now, the more interesting point about the whips. Yeah, MPs must have the freedom to say what they believe as long as they use a duty of care, as long as they're responsible. I'm concerned that in the future, there will be mRNA vaccines. As I said, there's research going on at the moment into vaccines which can actually stop cancers. And, if a responsible person like a member of Parliament starts to say mRNA vaccines, all mRNA vaccines, which is what he's been saying, are dangerous, then, that's not in the public interest at all.
Thank you very